Hello there. Welcome to AP Review of video number one, hopefully in the line of many. Today we are going to go over the political parties from the 1789 through about 1950. So I'll give you the generalizations of the various political parties in our nation, and that will most likely be covered in some capacity on the AP exam. So let's start with one of our favorite subjects, the American Revolution, when our patriots defeated the British Empire to strike out on their own. All right, so their first government was called the Articles of Confederation, and that lasted from 1781 to 1789. So the Articles typified of a decentralized power, so that means no strong central government, but power to the states, no parties, and no presidents. All right, so there was one major issue during the 1780s, and that, of course, was a cash flow problem. So there was economic troubles, and it appeared that the Articles, having a weak central government, could not correct the poor economy of this new nation. So 1787, new constitution was created and gave a strong central government with less power to the states, a federal system. So that brings along with our first presidential election of 1788. So our very first president, I want you to think of as Roberto Clemente as the very first Latin ball player in the Hall of Fame. So President Washington had no party affiliation, technically. So when he is president, he has obviously his treasurer in Hamilton and his Secretary of State in Jefferson. And those two philosophies kind of form our first two political parties. So the party of Hamilton, the Federalist Party, they were in favor of a strong central government, loose interpretation of the Constitution, pro-business, pro-manufacturing. Their power base is in the Northeast. They favored trade with Great Britain, and they established something called law and order, which we'll see in various other administrations and political philosophies as well. So the law and order is an important concept where we see that with Republicans of the 1920s and Republicans of Richard Nixon during the Vietnam War. The opposition of that, the Jefferson Party, we have the Democratic Republicans. So I would like for you to think of the Democratic Republicans. They're like the New York Yankees of the 1920s. They have a dynasty. They're winning every year. So the Democratic Republicans basically take you from 1801 to 1828. All right, so they have a long stretch in the White House. So the Democratic Republicans, they're more in favor of states' rights. They believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, although we know that Jefferson changes that while he's president. They stress the agricultural life, the rural life, their power base, their political base is in the South, in the West, and they want they want trade relations with France. And they don't stress law and order, they're stressing individual liberties, for example, when they oppose the Alien and Sedition Acts. After War of 1812, the Democratic Republicans, they're the only party. It's a one-party system. Like I said, they have a dynasty like the New York Yankees, right? So from 1801 to 1828, one-party system. Then we all know the pivotal election of 1824, aka the corrupt bargain, where Jackson has the most electoral votes but loses. That creates this. That brings an end to the era of good feelings, and we're back to a two-party system. So you have the Democrats, which is the party of Jackson, and they're going to oppose banks. They're going to oppose the Democrats. They're going to oppose people of privilege. They're going to favor manifest destiny, westward expansion, slavery, states' rights over the central government, and they are in favor of rural growth. The opposition to the Jackson Democrats would be the Whigs, kind of spearheaded by Henry Clay of Kentucky. So the Whigs They're around from 1836 to about 1850. They're the party of modernization. They're the party of the federal and state government will promote economic growth, the American system. Um, they are in favor of gradual expansion. Again, the Whigs primarily come about as opposition to Jackson's bank policy when he dismantles the bus. And the Whigs also are promoting reform like abolition, temperance, women's rights, etc. And they're your party of urbanization. So far, we have our Federalists, Democrat, Republicans, Democrats, and Whigs. Prior to the Civil War, we do have a few third parties that come about, mainly revolving on the issue of expansion of slavery. For example, the Liberty Party. They were your utmost abolitionists. They wanted to abolish slavery. Your Free Soil Party, they're opposed to the expansion of slavery out west, but they're not an abolitionist group. They want those jobs for white Americans moving out. And then our first nativist party, the Know Nothings, they're in opposition to the Germans and the Irish coming into America. So they're our first real anti-immigrant nativist political party. Then in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act by Stephen Douglas really upset a lot of Free Soilers, Know Nothings, Northern Whigs, and those three come together. It's an amalgamation. They create the Republican Party. So the Republicans, they oppose slavery in the new territory. They oppose slavery on a moral issue, but on a constitutional, on the idea of the Constitution, Republicans uphold slavery because it is in the Constitution. This all leads us to the 1860 election. So, 1860 election. Slavery is the main issue. We have four candidates. Really, the Democratic Party gets split. Lincoln wins as a Republican, and of course, the South secedes after Lincoln wins, and they become really the political power of states' rights. Excuse me. And the Republicans, they pretty much dominate Congress after the Civil War. So now let's move to the politics of the Gilded Age. What are some characteristics of the Gilded Age politics from 1865 to about 1900? So we know probably the number one idea or concept of philosophy of the politics of the Gilded Age was intense party loyalty, political corruption. Chester Arthur, I'm looking at you. There's really no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans during this time period. They're both pro-business, high voter turnout. I would say the only main difference between the Democrats and Republicans of the Gilded Age, your Democrats are power-based in the South and New York City, but in the South, they're your segregationist political party. Other than that, no major differences between the parties on foreign policy or economic policy. They're both promoting business. As the Gilded Age is creating immense wealth for the few, we do have another third party that comes about around the 1890s. That is your populist party. Let's just say the 1890s. All right, so the populists. This political party was mainly in support of the farmers. They're pro-silver. They want the government to own the railroads, the telegraph lines, because they don't want to be gouged by private businesses. They believe in direct election of senators, since the senators at that time were not elected, and they were in cahoots with big business. So populists wanted to get the people to vote for senators. They want an income tax to shrink the wage difference, the wealth difference. Overall, the populists do fail in the 1890s, mainly because the Republicans and the Democrats steal their agenda. So let's go to our next era, the Progressive Era. So like 1900 to 1920, Progressive Era politics. We have Theodore Roosevelt, Taft, and then Wilson. Republican, Democrat. Both of those parties, the progressives, the Democrats and Republicans, they support capitalism, but they don't want the laissez-faire. They want government regulations, government restrictions on corporations to end corruption, but they are indeed capitalists. They support reformers of the time period. They pass most of the populist agenda, and they believe, the progressive would really believe, that the government would be very active in regulating business and society. So then, after World War I, we have issues with the economy, a pandemic, a Red Scare, and so what happens in the 1920s, we see the Republicans take back the White House. And so the Republicans in the 1920s, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, they believe in pro-business. They want to deregulate big business, and they are indeed following the philosophy of their treasurer, Mellon, who is a believer of supply-side economics. So let's go tax cuts to the wealthy businesses, tax cuts to the wealthy. They'll invest and create jobs, and those workers would, of course, would consume goods and products, and then the economy would be rolling. So again, the Republicans of the 1920s believe in deregulation, a conservative approach, meaning less government is better, and they wanted to slow down immigration, as evidenced by the Immigration Acts of 21 and 24. So the Republicans of the 20s are the same as the Republicans of the 50s under Eisenhower and the Republicans of the 80s under Ronald Wilson Reagan. So then all of a sudden, end of the 20s, stock market crashes, other factors are in play, and then we have the Great Depression. And when we have great turmoil, it's an opportunity for somebody to step up and try to help out the Americans. So I want you to think of President Franklin Roosevelt as your, really as the president who's going to change the role of the government. He's going to be very brave in challenging the notion that that government should not be involved in helping society. So again, President Franklin Roosevelt is going to be the game changer with that. How about the zipper, huh? So again, President Roosevelt, brave. So in the 1930s to about 1950, the Democrats are in power, and they believe that the federal government is the protector of the people, that the federal government should spend money to help the economy, Keynesian economics. They believe in programs for the needy. They believe in an active government, like Social Security, minimum wage, public housing. The government needs to respond to the needs of the people. And we'll see that mindset of the Democrats throughout the 1930s and the 1940s, and then in the 60s with Kennedy and LBJ, and then again in the 90s with William Clinton, and then of course in the 2000s after the 2008 election with President Obama. All right, so they carry on that tradition. So what should we expect from the AP exam, the College Board? They're going to want to see similarities between like the Federalists and the Republicans of the 1920s and the Republicans of the 1980s. They want to see those, that's contextualization. They want to see if you can connect the different political parties throughout our nation with similar philosophies. So I hope this helped. And please stay tuned for more accolade-achieving, award-winning videos, hopefully, that will get you prepared for the AP exam. All right? Any questions, please email me, pmazuka@d125.org, or you could tweet at me at @mazuka21. Take care, and God bless.